Permission is given to you, and maybe we can start now. All right, so before we start, Ikhwan, already installed Lingo. In my previous announcement, I shared a link so that everybody Lingo, but let me just show you the page where you can install the software. Here we go. So what I call any version of 17 or higher. 17, 18 are acceptable. Actually, there's no much difference between these. And make sure that you install the most capable version, that is 64. So for example, if you want to install Windows and then Lingo version of 18, then you can just click on this download, and then you can install it in your PC or laptop. You can install version 19. So any version higher than 17 is acceptable. Actually, even 16 works, but 15 is not recommended. You can use even 16, 17, 18, 19, but since you are using this for the first time, so I would recommend you to install 19. Install the software in your PC or laptop. The next step is to install the full version. That means you have to request from the company. And let me show you how to do that. I will share now the screen with you so that you can see this one. Probably this one is not showing, but let me just reshare it again. Okay, so from this page, you can request an educational research license. So all what you need to do is just to send an email using this email address, and make sure that you are using CAFE email, your student email, not your personal email. And then you can just ask them to provide you with the license. The license within a couple of days. If you already sent this during the working days, and should receive the license within 2 days. But as I heard from students, they receive it within like a couple of hours even. Okay, so your KFU email address, and then you can just request the license and you will get it inshallah very soon. Now, what is the difference between the demo version and the license version? Well, in the demo version, you have restricted number of variables and constraints. So you cannot run this of large scale system. However, in the license version, you can enjoy with an restricted number of constraints and variables, solve large scale problems. Okay, so I assume that you have already done that, or you will do it inshallah soon. That was Usaid or Usaid. Yes, go ahead, Usaid.
I would just like to ask before you start, why is it Lingo and not GAMS or MATLAB or Excel? What does Lingo do and the others can't?
Okay, so this is actually why Lingo. Actually, Lingo, not Lingo, because Lingo includes also nonlinear optimization problem. So again, why Lingo and not other softwares? Well, you can use any international recognized solvers, including Lingo, GAMS, Simplex, Gorobi in Python. Okay, you can use any softwares, any solvers. This is okay. However, some of these solvers are not available for free. For example, you cannot use GAMS for large scale problems. You have to pay for that, or you have to use KFU PM labs in order to run large scale problems. Now for Lingo, you can just request the license and you can solve any restricted number of variables and problem. So this is one reason. Another reason, some of the other softwares, like for example, I can teach you, let's say, Python, or yes, Gurubi in Python. And by the way, Gurubi is the fastest solver ever. Asra solver for integer programming is Gurubi solver embedded with Python. Now, some of you have no background in Python, and this is why we need to go farther and do one more step. That means you need first to learn Python. You should learn the structure and then learn how to use Gurubi in Python. So this is like a 2 steps. In Lingo, you didn't need to do that. In terms of the usability, in terms of Lingo is the most powerful modeling language. And you'll see, inshallah, through the example. So because of the easeability, variability, it's available, okay? Sorry, because of the availability and because of the easeability, Lingo is a preferred here. But again, you can use Excel is not recommended at all because again, Excel cannot solve large scale problem. In Excel, you cannot even for constraints. Things will be more complicated. So it will be out of luck if you are using Excel. So Excel is out of the choices here. Did I answer to your question?
Yes, clear. Thank you.
All right. If yes, then I will go and get started. Okay. So let me just share the slides. Of course, I will go with the workshop using Lingo directly, but sometimes I need to concept. Okay. Well, this is a brief Lingo. I didn't claim that I will cover everything related to Lingo. This is impossible. I will go over the basic things that you may need for your project, for your senior designer project, probably for your future projects. But again, if you want more, there's a handout, not handout, but manually, but user manual. You can just download this. You can just type it in Google, Lingo user manual. So you can download, but unfortunately I cannot post it in the blackboard because of the copyright. But you as a student, you can do. Okay, so what should we learn out of this workshop? The first point, I will go over the basic features of Lingo. Okay, maybe I can answer this question, why Lingo, but in different contexts. And then we should learn how to define the optimization problem. So whenever I say optimization problem, that means how to define variables, objective function, and constraints. I guess you have this background from ISE 303. In order to start modeling an optimization problem, step number 1, you need to define the variables. Then you move from the variables to the objective functions, and finally to the constraints. So how would we translate problem statement into codes using Lingo? So this is the first, so this is the second item. Then we will talk about some tools that we commonly used along with Lingo, or with any modeling language, with any optimization. For example, how to initialize sets. How can we initialize sets? And then how to generate constraints. And then how to use summation. These are very common and is used commonly in any optimization problem. Okay. Now, I was thinking about how can I get it started? What kind of a problem that I should introduce to the student during the workshop? And then I said, okay, let's start with trivial example. That's like a example. When I say trivial example, that means very simple example. Now, is it that you have the following problem here. A carpenter makes tables and chairs, and each table can be sold for a profit of $30 and the chair for $10. So clearly here we want to maximize some sort of objective function, which is in this case the profit. Then we have some constraints. For example, the carpenter can afford up to 40 hours, that is 6 hours for table and 3 hours for chair. And also I have a constraint regarding to demand and another constraint regarding to storage space. Now, if you want to write a code to solve this problem, clearly, let me just share the screen with you. Again, this is very simple and a trivial example just for demonstration. Then I will move to more complicated things. Now, for this particular example, ya Shabab, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. So first of all, we need to define the decision variables. How many chairs and how many, for example, this xt denotes the number of tables made per week and xt number of chairs per week. Now, back to your question, why Lingo? Now, when you read this code is self-explained. It is easy to read, it is easy to understand. Now, if you read this one here, can you guess what is it all about?
Maximize the profit.
Exactly. This is actually the objective function, which seeks to maximize the profit. So here I have 30 price multiplied by the number of tables plus the selling price for the chairs multiplied by the number of chairs. Then this constraint here is what for total work time, this constraint for demand, and this constraint for storage capacity or storage space, and then negative constraints. لاحظوا يا إخوان how easy it is. When you read it, it doesn't require any further explanation. It is a this is clearly another constraint, which means that XC, where XC is the number of chairs, should be greater than or equal to 3 times X. When you read this like 6 multiplied by XT plus 3 multiplied by XC is less than or equal to 40. So it is easy to understand it. Maybe this is another reason why we are using Lingo here. But you should keep in mind and know the rest of the not easy as this one. Again, this example is just for illustration. Now, how would you run this solver, ya ikhwan? Can you see this icon? Can represent to solve. Now, when you click on this icon, the following dialog will show up. Can you see this one, Yashar? Okay, let's try to understand what's going on here. First of all, when you look to this dialog of different sections. This section is for solver status. Now it says here model class is LP. So what is LP? LP, more specifically, it's a continuous linear programming. The state is a global optimization. That's the optimal and local. And this one is the value of the objective function. And the infeasibility is 0. I don't have any infeasibility here. And the condition is 3. Okay, what does this mean? It means that if you implement simplex algorithm, the one that is used to coming, it takes 3 iterations to get this one solved. Now, the second section here, which means extended solver, this is for the case of dealing with the same mixed integer programming or nonlinear optimization problem, where you need extended solver. You don't need any extended solver because all what we need is to solve it using simplex algorithm. But let's assume that the problem is mixed integer programming. Then I need here algorithm. Okay. Now this variable here means that how many variables are included in your model. Here I have only two variables, any nonlinear or integer variables, and this is why we have here zeros. I have a total of 6 constraints, and then of course, the execution almost zero. It's actually 0.12, as you can see here, which is almost zero, less than 1 second. Right, and the value of xt and x, that's the optimal value of the number of tables and chair, which is 1.33 and 10.67. The other information for the slugs and super price is also given here. طيب بعد ما تعرفنا يا شباب على البيسك features of solution and blah blah blah, I want just to point out something. When you install Lingo and go to help, there is something called, can you see this one? Now here we have some information about the license that you are using. Some of the constraints are limited. The variables are limited. Integer variables, nonlinear, global are all unlimited. Show you with the full version. Now, the reason why I'm using version 16 because I have KFUPM license, and this one is not like temporary, it's a permanent one, so I can use it forever or at least for 5 years. I don't need to okay. Now back again to the slides. After this small intro. Okay, طبعا in our example here, you can use different type of variables. You can use, for example, any positive integer using this function at GIN. You can use a binary value using at, you can use free, you can use also a bounded variable. So in order to use any particular variable to declare the following function, which is at function. So for example, if you want to, okay, would you, so that, okay, thank you. Now, for example, if you want to make your variable is, then you need to replace this function by GIN. If you want to make it, for example, binary, which is very common, then you have to replace this function IN and so on. Now here we have a specific type of variable which has specified bounds, B and D. So this like, right, here you have lower bound and upper bound, so we can also use this function. Now back again to our example. So for example here, as you can see, and by default, if you did not specify the type of variables, by greater than or equal to 0, by default. Now here, does it make sense to have a fraction number of chairs and fraction number of tables? Or we make this xt and xc like what, ya ikhwan? This has to be what? GIN, right?
Integer.
Is it GIN or? Yeah. All right, so. Okay, so GIN here. And then here I have, this also has to be what? Positive integer. Don't worry about the details. I will talk about this inshallah later. So now what I did basically, I the variable type from continuous positive into positive integer. Now, when I run this again, give me the value of xt and xc, which is in this case, xt is 2 tables and xc is 8 chairs, and the objective function is 140 with the previous case. Now, if you look to the modulo class this time, it says what? Pure integer linear programming, PILP, for pure integer linear programming, and the state is global optimum, and the objective is 140. Now here I have Brand and Bouch algorithm, and this is why the external solver is enabled, and the best objective is 140. Okay, but of course you can change the variable according to your problem. If it's mixed integer programming and some of the variables binary, then in this case we have to use what? bin. If it's positive integer, gin, and so on. Right. Now let's go to more serious things. Let me just close this. Sorry. Okay. Now, let me go with more serious things this time. Before that, even, let me just introduce the concept. Now, the first thing that we should learn here, and this is very crucial, is how to define sets. How to define sets. Okay. Now, to define sets, we have to have a section, and that section should start with sets. And always it should be ended with end sets. In between, I have to declare my sets. We'll see, shall I, through the example, how this works. Now, the sets can have attribute. What is the attribute? Attribute here like parameter or variable. Now, when you define set, also you need to define the attribute and the variable associated with sets. You will see this inshallah in a moment. Now, to define the sets, you should first specify the name of the set and its member or size. And this is optional. Sometimes the size is not required because the size can be already defined by the data set, as you will see later. And sometimes you have an empty set. That means set without any attributes, sets without any variable. Now, let me explain these things now using Lingo. This is much better than going through these slides. Now, let's assume that you want to declare attribute for the student grade. Let's assume that you have a group of students and you want to enter their grades. Let's say, for example, I have variable, which is the grades. Sorry. Grades. Okay. And I want to have the grade for each student. For example, the student, the grade of the second student, the grade of the third, and so on. So how would we define that? First of all, we need to set, And always you should close this section by end sets. Now, I have to declare my sets. For example, let's assume that here I have the following variable or parameter, which is called grade sets. Now it's required. The sets required here actually is the index of the attribute. The index of a grade is what? Student, right? Initiate a set called student. Now, this is the name of the set. So define its size. What will be the size of the set? Well, the size of the set may be, here I have 5 students, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay? And then this sets include which attribute or variable? It's right. So here I have to declare this variable grades. Always I have to close any statement by semicolon. Otherwise, there will be a misreading by Lingo. All the time, ya shabab, close this by semicolon. So what does this mean? It means that here the student and the size of the set is 5. That means I have 5 students and I want to determine their grades. So for example, when they will show up, the grades of the first student, which is 1, the grade of the second student, the grade of the third, fourth, fifth, and of course, the zeros because I did not assign any value, any grade for these students. Now, is this the only way to define this? No. We may, for example, do the following. When you type double dot, it means that start from number 1, which is the same as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is very useful, especially if the size is, say, 100, 1000, and so on. And even that, sometimes even make it like this. Student number 1, okay, until student, let's say, number 5. So will be understood by Lingo that you have to start from string student number 1 to string student number 5. So it can be actually operate using different forms. Either you can say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is very traditional, or you can have a range 1 and then double dot, and then you have to specify the length of the length of the set, or you can declare strings like this one, stu1 till stu number 5. Now, let me go back again to this. Okay, 1 double dot 5. Now, if I want to enter the grades, then I have to declare another section called data. So under data here, also I have to close the data. Okay, and enter the. So the grades in this case is basically is what? The grade of the student, right? Here I have 5 students, then I should, how many values? 5. So say, for example, out of 10, I have 10, then 9, then 7.5, then 5, then 8. Now, what should I expect to have? When I run this, I should have a values assigned for each student. So for example, the grade of the first student is 10, the grade of the second student is 9, the grade of the third student is 7, and so on. طيب, so far there is nothing significant or important. Now let's assume that you have here up to, say, 100. Okay. But this time you want to do something else. You want to define the grade of the student in a particular subject or a particular score. In other words, I may do the following. I need to, again, define grades. Okay, of student. and also of what specific course. So how many indices do I have this time? Here I have 2 indices, and therefore how many sets should I initialize? 2 sets, right? So first of all, I should, and the grade will be belong to which set? Is it to student set or course set or the combined set of student and course? The combined one, right? So first of all, let's say that I have here, say, maybe just make it simple, and then we'll go over some tricky things. So assume that you have, and then you have another set called course, and this course contains 2 subjects or 2 courses, and ISE 422. Now I need to define another set that combines sets, right? So let me just call this set combined. You can call it anything. Now when I just call it combined, then I have to combine, which is students and course. Now under this combined, I should what, ya ikhwan? Attribute in this case, which is the grades. Can you see the difference between this example and the previous one? Example, I have a grade of the student. Now I have the grade of the student and also in a particular course. This, I will have the following: a grade of student number 1 in course math, and then the grade of the first student 422. Then the grade of the second with math, the grade of the second with ISA 422, and so on. Can you see the difference, Shabab? Here I have 2 in. So this is basically our sets. Yeah, and if you have 3 indices, that means you have to create 3 sets and 1 more set for together. Since here I have 2 indices, in total I have to create how many sets? 3 sets. Student, 1 set for the course, and another set that combines these 2 sets together. Okay, and the same thing here. If I want to define, say, let me just define here the data 10, 9, 7.5, 5, 8. Later on, we will learn how to read this from Excel. Probably you have here, in total, I have, by the way, in total, how many data I have here? What is the size of the data? Can you guess? 10, yes, which is basically 5 times 2. So maybe I have here another 5.5, 7.5, 8, 9. So in total, how many I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. I have what? Assign grade for each student and subject. Okay. Any question, ya Shabab? Is this clear? Any questions so far? To initialize sets. So in general, how should, yeah, go ahead.
دكتور إذا أبغى أنشئ أكثر من مثلا أبغى أسوي ست يكون فيها الآي والجي لنفس الفاريبل. أتمنى فهمت قصدي. يعني الفكرة إنه مثلا عندي نقول كيو آي وأبغى كيو جي كمان، بس ما أبغاهم يتساوي، يعني آي وجي ما أبغاهم نفس الشيء. فهمتني؟
You want to make the indices different?
Yes, but for the same variable.
For the same variable.
I
mean, for example, here I have another variable, right? Maybe not a grade, but level, maybe, for example. So here I have another variable again with respect to the combined set. This is fine. I can have another variable, let's say, for example, order.
Can I give you an
like
example?
this. Yeah, this is an example here. So here, how many attributes do we have under the combined set? 3: grades, level, orders. That means when I write the order, the order will be written in terms of what? The combined set, which is student
And course.
and course. لاحظي the same combined set have more than one attribute, one variable, more than one parameter. This is also fine. Okay, Ammar, go ahead.
Yes, Doctor. I will ask you, how can I get the benefit of the sets to find the solution of the linear programming?
Yes, sets are very, very crucial. Why? Because in summation, you need to have sets. Generating the constraints using loop, you should first have sets. You will see this, inshallah, through the examples later. So this is why we start first with sets, because something crucial before you start modeling, before you start writing the code and writing the summation, generating constraints. First, you should have sets. You will see the benefit of this, inshallah, later through the examples. Okay. Now, let me ask you to try the following here. This is like an exercise. Probably we can. For example, here I have, let's say, a set called warehouses, and the size of the set is 6. Write it in this way. And then what are the attribute assigned to the warehouse is the capacity. So always the capacity should be written with respect to warehouse capacity of the first warehouse, second warehouse, third warehouse, and so on. Or, for example, this way, as we said, instead of writing this as a list, you can just type here double dot, and then you can end this with the last item or the last element in the set. Here we have a different variety of forms of how the set can be initialized. You can use implicit member list 1 to 5, or you can just write it in this way, or you can use a string. As you can see here, this is the starting point, and this one is the ending point, like for example, track to tracks 204. So we're going to start from track number 3 and end with tracks number 204. Or you can use it along with days. Day end is that from Monday to Friday. Or month M dot month, and it will be understood by Lingo that you start from October to January. Okay. The same thing for month year M and month year N. You can do exactly the same. And also by length or the size of the set can be specified in the data section. And this is very useful. Okay, let me go over this here just to illustrate the idea. So let me just copy this, because I'm going to use this data, or okay, let me just make this one here. Okay, here I have data. Okay, and then in between, I can, for example, specify the length. Let's say, for example, from 1 to C, to 5 or 100 or whatever. So is this possible? Yes, this one is also possible. Why should I declare data here? طبعا when I had them in a green, it means that this will not be read by Lingo. Now, why I start with data? Because sets here will read, ya shabab, the data given by data section. So for example, C is already defined here as C is equal to 5. So if you declare data section after n sets, there will be a misreading. All right. Okay, so is this possible? Yes, this one is all this way. Yeah, instead of doing this in as C, sorry, as a number, you can define, and this is very useful. Let's assume that you want to try different scenarios and different cases, and you want to adapt different number and set sizes. So this will be very easy for you to change this from time to time. All right. Now back again to this. So now let's practice the following. You want to define the following: the demand D at period T and customer zone C. Okay, so let me share this here. Now assume that you want to define the following: the demand at period T and customer zone C. Okay, how would we write this, Akhwan?
Using
Oh,
combination.
Yeah,
Combined
go
function.
ahead. First of all, I should initialize how many sets?
3 time demand.
No, demand is the attribute. This is like the variable or parameter. I'm talking about the sets. What are the sets that should I initialize here? السيتس عبارة عن الاندسي. أن تعرف كم ست تنظر للاندسيز. So how many sets? How many sets يا شباب?
3
3.
دكتور.
Yeah, 3 sets. Excellent. So 1 for
T.
T.
C.
C, and another one for
Combination.
exactly. Excellent. So here, let's say I can define period. This is a set, and here I have, let's say, from 1 to 7 days. Now, this is like an empty set. That means I should not assign any attribute or variable here, because what I'm interested in, combined set and not the set itself. Now another set for customer. Okay, let's assume that I have how many customers? I have 10 customers. Okay, again, this is gonna be without any attribute or variables. Now I go to the combined, anything, combined, ling, anything, okay? So the combined should contain what? The period and customer. Code here, the demand. All right. Okay. Oh, sorry. This has to be what? Double dot. Yeah. So when I run this, I should get, طبعا the size here, it will be what, يا إخوان? The size is 70, right? Which is 7. So for example, here, the demand at period or at day 6 or and customer zone 4. All right. واضحة يا شباب؟ في أي سؤال؟ Okay. Now, what will be the following? How would you define the following? Quantity of a product P planned to be sent distribution center I to customer zone C at period T. Wow, looks a little bit Can you try it?
We need 5 sets.
Or 5? Okay, let me just count it here. First of all, I need P, I, C, T. This is 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I have the combined one. So in total, how many?
5.
5. صحيح? And what will be the attribute or variable?
Quantity of products.
The quantity, yes, the quantity, which is like, for example, a queue or order, something like that.
It is B here, Doctor.
No, not P. P here is the product. The quantity, which is the order size, which is a queue. So that's actually the variable. And the indices will be P, I, C, and so this is going to be like this. If you just want to write it, it's going to be like a Q, where Q is the quantity, and the indices is P, and here I have also I, which is the distribution center, and then I have what the customer zone C, and then I have period T. Okay. So in total, how many sets do I have? 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and the combined set. So in total, I need 5 sets, and including the combined one. Okay. So let me go now with the next item. Do you have any question يا شباب؟ في أي سؤال؟ واضحة هذه؟ This is something very important. If you understand, طبعا احنا still we did not write a full code for a full optimization problem. I want to go slowly, step by step. First, we need to understand how to initialize sets. This is something very, very important. Is this clear? Yeah, Shab, is this clear? Do you have any question? Okay, thank you very much. Now, let me move to the next item, which is also very important. How to, these are the powerful tools. Okay, sorry. Yeah, how to initialize, how to generate constraints using for loop, and also how to use at or the summation. Now, before I go with this one, let me go to the Lingo first. Now, let's assume that you have our previous example. All right, where we have, let me just remind you with the example. You have the grades. Okay, and then here we have, let's say, student, and then what? Course. Here I have 2. Okay. Now, so how many sets do I have, or should I have? Again, I have 3 sets in total, right? Let me just consider this like a 5. And then here I have, let's say, courses or subject. I have math and ISE 422. And then I have the combined set, which is basically the student and course. Right. And now, which attribute should be belong to this? The grades. Right. Now, what should I do here? Basically, I want to take the summation of the students, of the student grades in both subjects. What should I do? I want to take the summation of the student in both subjects, in math and ISE 422. So how to use summation function? The summation function, so the summation starts with the following: at, then sum. Sorry, this has to be like this. At sum. Now, since I will take the summation here, this is like when you take the summation over what and what. Let's say over the student and over what? The subject, right? And then here you have the grades. The grades with respect to student and subject, which is I and G. معتوني يا اخوان؟
Yes, Doctor.
Okay, so here I can do the same thing. I want to take the summation over the number of students and also the courses. I want to take the summation of the grades over the number of students and the courses. So I can use sum, and then I have to use the combined set because the summation will be what? Executed over the combined sets. Now I have to use the counter, like that. I and J, you can use anything, I, J, and anything, okay? Let me just keep it like simple, like I and J. So where I can, this I here refers to student number, excellent, which starts from 1 to 5. And J is
The courses.
the courses. In our case, we have only 2 courses, which is math and ISE 422. So I will take the summation over these both. And then I have to what? Write the grades also in terms of what? I and J. And let me just call this, for example, Z. Okay. So this basically will take the summation of all the grades over the number of students, which is in our case, we have 5 students, and also over the number of courses, which is in this case, I have 2 courses. Now, when I run this, I will get Z is equal to what? 0. صحيح? Now, let me just make this one without, let me just enable this.
Doctor,
Yes.
here the grades, you consider it as the attribute, right?
Yes, the attribute, always the attribute. This is the grade here. The grade is defined in terms of 2 things, right?
No, I mean
Student.
the Z, okay.
Student and course, which is basically the combined set. Okay, now this will take the summation, and the summation now becomes, okay, let me just erase this just to see everything. Now the summation is what, ya akhwan? 97.5. You simply take the summation of the grades over all the 5 students in both subjects, in both courses. Okay. Is this clear, ya shabab? It's very simple. Now, طبعا, of course, you can, let's say, you can use, for example, max. So what does max mean? Max, that means you want to maximize the objective function. So the max here, طبعا, the max here will be fixed. يعني, it will be a linear program, but it will be fixed 97.5 because here I have no constraints. All these parameters and variables defined with numbers. So definitely I should have a summation of 79.5. But this is just an example. And the same thing for minimum. It will give you exactly the same thing, which is 79.5. Okay. طيب. طبعا, this is not a full optimization of problem. This is just to illustrate to you how we use summation function. Okay.
Doctor?
Yes.
So can you write by hand the objective function? It's not very clear for me.
Yeah, the objective function starts with the following. For example, max. نشوف إن شاء الله بعدين. Max, it means that you want to maximize this function. and min, it means that you want to minimize this function. Always start in this way. Minimum is equal or max equal. If you want to minimize or maximize any objective function, always start with this following syntax. Min is equal or max is equal. We'll see this through the example. Don't worry.
Doctor,
Here I'm not يعني how we write an complete optimization problem. I'm just focusing on a specific feature وبعدين بنجمعهم كلهم مع بعض. Specific feature. The specific feature here is the summation. Yes, go ahead.
If we have a student and course and for example a year, J,
yes.
I, J, H, and
yes.
the combination will be for I and J and H, yes?
Yes, exactly. يعني مثلا year مثلا يعني نقدر نعرف here another set called year, and this over how many years you would like to have this?
Maybe 2 years, 3 years.
2 years, 3 years. Okay.
So
okay.
if I want to do the summation over the student and course only without the year, how I will do it?
Yeah. Here in this case, you need to. We will see this inshallah for loop. That means you have to fix the years and take the summation. You will see this inshallah just in a moment. Okay. Good question. طيب هذه مفهوم النقطة يا شباب قبل ما ننتقل لسؤال زميلكم اللي هي الفور لوب. Okay. Next item is how to generate constraints in general. Okay, let me just disable this one. Now this time I want to generate constraints. يعني مثلا you want to say the summation of the grades for I and J, where I is the number of students and J is the number of courses. مثلا يعني should be greater than or equal to 5. طبعا this has to be for what? For all I and J, right? How would we write this? How would we write this in Lingo? Okay, so we use the following function, which is for loop. So yeah, maybe because I did not close this. Yeah, I have to. Now the loop should be done over what, يا إخوان? Over I and J, right? Yeah, and over the combined set. So here I have to use the, and then I have to use what? This, and then I write my constraints. So the constraint in this case is what? Is what, يا شباب? Yes, the grades I and J should be greater than or equal to 5. And you have to make sure that the bracket is matched. Okay. طبعا when you run this it will not show anything. واضح لأنه هنا I don't have here يعني the value always 5 5 5. But what بعدين full optimization problem. But if you want to see how this can be executed or read by Lingo, there's something called generate and display model. Now, when you display the model, what does it show? The grade for the first student in math should be greater than or equal to 5. The grades of the first student in IEC 422 should be greater than or equal to 5. And then the grade of the second student in both subjects, the grade of the third student in both subjects, and so on. Can you see this one? So this is actually equivalent to what, يا إخوان? To this constraints, right? Because here it says that the grade for each student in both subjects should be what? greater than or equal to 5. صحيح؟ نعم، نجي سؤال زميلكم سنفترض مثلا and I want to مثلا يعني let me just do it in this way. I want to have the summation of the grades I and J. Remember, I is for the number of students and J for the courses. The summation of the subject grades and the summation over J should be greater than or equal to مثلا يعني 10. This is طبعا for all what? For all I. صحيح? For all I. So how can I write this here? So first of all, the for loop should be done over what, يا إخوان? The for loop should be done over I, while the summation should be done over J. So how would we write this? First of all, the for loop should be done over not combined set, but instead it should be done over what, huh? Course, sorry, over student. هذا أول حاجة. And then which one I have to use, I or J? I. So I need to remove this. And then I have another function called, so add sum, and then the summation should be done over, sorry, grades, over grades, but the summation should be done over what, يا إخوان? Over course or student?
Student.
لا, course. This is for all student and the summation over course. لاحظ, the summation over J, where J is for course. طبعا you have to make sure that you close the bracket. So how this will be read by, can be read by Lingo. I'm sorry, there is something missing here. Okay. There is grades. Oh, sorry.
Shouldn't be courses.
IJ, but the summation will be. Okay. Sorry. There is a problem here. There is a problem here. Sorry. So this is gonna be, yes. You are right. Course. And then J, and yeah, now this should be fine now. Okay, yes. So the summation over the course, and then of course, this has to be greater than or equal to 5. Yeah, missing right parentheses. I have to make sure that the parentheses is already here. More parentheses. يا شباب طبعا اذا تبغى تعرف البارنتسيز اول just يعني use the cursor of the mouse here, it will show you انه this match. لاحظ هذا احمر وهذا احمر. That means this one is match with this one. Okay, مثلا this one here match with this one. This one here match. So sometimes still we have something. Okay, so okay, maybe this has to be removed. Okay, now it should be fine. Okay. احيانا الاقواس ترى تستعمل شويه شوشره ف you have to be careful. It's not a big deal, but you have to make sure that you know the يعني you have the right parentheses. Okay, now let me show how this can be read by Lingo. Now when you go to the solver, generate and display model. لاحظ يا grades of the first student in math plus the grades of the first student in IC 422 should be greater than or equal to 5. Said this has to be greater than or equal to 10. Okay, let me just fix it. I want just to fix this to 10 instead of 5. Just to make it يعني make sense. Sorry. Generate, display model. Yeah, so the grade of the first student in both subject should be what, greater than or equal to 10. Can you see the difference between the previous one? In the previous scenario, the grade of the student in each subject should be greater. Now this time the grade of student in both subjects, that means the grade of math plus the grade of IEC 422 should be greater than or equal to 10. يعني once you formulate this in hand, you should be able to transform it into Lingo code. Okay. في أي سؤال يا شباب؟ Is this clear? كيف عملنا هذه؟ واضحة هذه النقطة ولا لا؟ طيب. Okay. So we will have a break of 10 minutes and then inshallah we will move to a real example. A real example. يعني a complete example with constraint, with variable, objective function, and constraints. And also we will learn how to read and the data from Excel and how to export the solution to the Excel. This is our next step. So we will have a, yeah.
Doctor, if we just the same question of mine before, if
Yes.
we have at 4 student and for all student for all years, the summation over courses, how I will write it?
Two ways here. إذا تبغى تعملها for all student and for all year, ممكن تعمل another set here that combines student with year.
Okay.
Okay, يعني مثلا تعمل another combined set. مثلا خلينا نسميها هذه link. Okay, with this link طبعا you have to have first what another
اللي هو year.
set called year. مثلا يعني. And then this links. مثلا you want to have this for all year and for all what?
For
year
all
and
students.
student. So for example, you can just write it in this way: student and year. خلاص هذا حتكون ايش؟ بدون anything. هذه you will use it only for loop. يعني here you will link. طبعا this is I and K. لاحظ you cannot use J. You cannot use J. Remember.
Okay.
I for student, sorry, this student is for students and year here is K. هذه طريقة ثانية you duplicate a loop at 4 over I, then at 4 over K. يعني the second method, do it in another way. Another way you say, for example, for student over I, and then at again for here J.
Okay.
And then sorry K. Okay, so this to using this.
Okay.
Both are correct. The break, after we come back from the break, we will have a complete يعني example عشان لا نشتتكم. بس أنا الهدف إنه I want to focus on feature before we go يعني before we put everything together. This is more efficient than يعني to illustrate an example in one stage. Okay, initialize sets, and then how to use summation, and then how to generate constraint using for loop. After the break, we'll have a complete example, including how to import and export data from Excel. Okay, so we'll have a break of 10 minutes. And Khalid, are you around? Khalid Saeed.
Yes.
Yeah, probably you can post the link of, because you told me that you have a link.
Yes. It's already posted in the chat.
Yeah.
So please fill the link for the certificates.
Okay, so we'll have a break of 10 minutes. So we will meet at 10:55. Recording, because it's like a break of 10 minutes. Actually, I'm not the one who's responsible for recording. The System Engineering Club, I think, Khalid, I think
Yes.
you can,
Yes.
please.
I've continued now the record.
Okay, thank you very much. So for this file that we discussed in the class, would like to know how to specify or how to initialize the sets here. Now, I ask you, Ashab, how many sets do we have to initialize? Any idea? Okay, let's see here. 3. Okay. Yeah, Ashab, with Khalid, he says 3. Do you agree with him?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, 3. In total, we have to initialize 3 sets. So one set for one set for I, and another set for
J.
And another one for
Combination between them.
yes. Now, if I ask you which parameter or variable should be under set I,
The length and the width.
all
And
I, all, and all IU. That's it.
also WIL and WIU.
Huh? What else?
PI.
PI, and probably forget these. These are the decision variables, right? That will specify the location. Department xi double prime, xi prime, yi double prime, and yi prime, right? And what else? Center of the department, alpha I and beta I. Okay, what are the variables or which is J? Hi, Akhwan. J.
اللي هو alpha and beta.
Yes, alpha J and beta J, exactly. That's the only two. Now, what are or variables which are under the combined set of I and J?
Doctor, I have to clarify alpha plus and alpha minus, and also beta plus and also beta minus, right?
Yes, yes.
And for I also,
This
because it's
minus, these
the
are
objective
like
function.
the variable name. You can just quote, for example, alpha positive ij, alpha negative ij. This plus and minus, this like name. Yeah, to distinguish the positive part of this and the negative part of this, we just give them plus and minus. Now, my question is, what are the parameter or variables which are under the combined set of I and j? You just mentioned alpha plus, alpha ij minus, beta ij plus, and beta ij minus. Anything else?
ZIJ.
IJ.
zij and zji, right? طبعا نتكلم عنها ان شاء الله بعدين. How would we write a constraint like this? Zij and zji, it's the same set, it's under the same set, but we just change what the index. The index has to be switched, but the set is the same. We'll see this, how can we write a code for this one. And also Fij and Cij. Okay. Right. Now let me go full example this time that will demonstrate the usage of the previous functions. Let's see. Now, this is one of the traditional problem, which is transportation problem. Now, in these problems, we deal with transporting orders from one location to another to minimize the good or the order transportation cost. So first of all, we define the parameters. Always, Shabab, whenever you define or whenever you model an optimization problem, first we need to start with sets, parameters, decision variables. Now in the parameters here, we have Cij, that's actually the transfer from warehouse I to vendor J. And then we have the demand for vendor J, and finally the capacity of warehouse I. Well, the one variable, which is basically the optimal load size that has to be shipped or sent from the warehouse I to vendor J. Now, what's the problem here? We want to minimize the order transportation cost. That means we multiply the lot size Q by the transportation cost from the warehouse I to the vendor J. Now, assume that we have 6 warehouses in total and 8 vendors. So the objective function will look like this. We have 2 more constraints, one for the demand and the other one for the capacity. Now, as for demand constraint, we have to, that means the order that has been shipped or sent from the warehouse to the vendor has to meet what, ya ikhwan, the demand at vendor. And each vendor. Here we have the capacity constraint that we have to ensure that the order size should be less than or equal to the capacity. Otherwise, it's into infeasible. And this should be applied for each warehouse. So CAI basically is the capacity of warehouse I. Of IJ has to be what, F1, real positive. By default, if you did not define QI, whether it is a binary integer or free or whatever, by default, it will be set as greater than or equal to 0. طيب, هذه هي الموديل باختصار. This is very simple model. How would we write a Lingo code that represent this model? Start with sets. Do I have يا شباب? Let me just go to this one. أول حاجة عشان أعرف what are the sets do I need, I have to look to the indices of the parameters and variables. How many indices do I have in total? 3. One for I, another one for J, and one more combined set. Okay. So in this case, I have one index for the warehouse, and in total I have 6 warehouses, another index for vendor, and in total I have 8 vendors. I have a combined set of warehouses and vendor. So in this case, I have the sets here, and I have in total 6 warehouses, and which parameter or variable that belongs to the warehouse set is the capacity, right? The capacity. And which one belongs to the vendor? Only the demand. The demand is a parameter that belongs to the vendor set. Now I have 2 attributes belongs to the lengths of the warehouses and vendor. One of them is the cost. Again, this one is a parameter, and another one is a variable, order size or volume. So this is like step number 1. I have to initialize the sets, and I assign the attribute into the right set. Step number 2, I need to declare my data. This is another section. It should be declared right away after set section. Now, in the traditional way, I have to also declare the data into my Lingo code. Yeah, and in a few minutes, we will learn how to import and export the data from Excel. But let me do it in very traditional way, and then we will move to it. So here I have the capacity, the demand, and the cost. The cost is like a matrix this time. And it's actually 6 by 8. 6 by 8. Now, how can I write the objective function? To write the objective function, I use MIN. Why MIN, which is min? Min, because here I'm interested to minimize the order transportation cost. Do you remember this one? This is what we have here, min. And then we do the summation over I and J. That means over warehouses and vendors. Multiplied by the volume. Both cost and volumes are defined in terms of warehouse and vendor. واضحة هذه يا شباب؟ شو عملناها بهذه الطريقة؟ We'll see this through the Lingo code. But in the meantime, is this clear? So what does this mean basically? This means minimizing of the summation and J. طبعا I start from 1 to 6, J start from 1 to 8 of what? Of the cost Cij times the order. The order I think is a Q. I and J. So this one here is equivalent to this. Okay. Now the demand constraints. Now, if you look to the demand constraint here, the loop should be executed over the number of vendors, which is over J. Therefore, when I say at 4, this has to be done over what, ya shabab? Over vendor, right? And I have already defined a set called vendors. Vendor, and I just call this J. So this should be done in this way, at 4 vendors J, and then here I have a summation over the warehouses over I, and then I need to multiply the volume by, then the volume should be equal to the equal to the demand. Now for the capacity, the for loop should be executed over I, over the number of warehouses, but the summation should be over what? Over the vendor. And عكس هذا الconstraint عكس هذا بالضبط. And then of course I have to ensure that the order or the volume is less than or equal to the warehouse capacity. Okay, now let me see how this can be done using Lingo. Now assume that you have, in this example, I assume I have 6 warehouses and 8 vendors. But let's assume that you have large data, thousands of vendors and thousands of warehouses. Should I do it in this way? I mean, in the previous traditional way, or I have to import and export the data frame from Excel? In this case, I have to read the data from the Excel, and also the solution should be reported over the Excel file. Now let's learn how to do that in Excel. خليكم معي يا شباب، هذه تعتبر نقطة مهمة الآن. أول حاجة, let's assume that I have the data provided to me in Excel. Okay, so in this case, how many warehouses? This is just an example. Still, this problem is not a big problem. This is a very small problem. But عشان بس illustration of how to use Excel to import or to read the data. So that the number of warehouses I have, how many? This time I have 30 warehouses, and the capacity for each warehouse is also provided over here. Okay, so I have one row for the warehouse number and another row for the capacity. The same thing for the vendor. Let's assume that I have in total, how many vendors? I have, let's say 40. Okay, and then the CIJ, which is the cost, the transportation cost from warehouse I to vendor J, is provided like that. يعني مثلا هذه 8, it means what? That the cost transported from warehouse 4 to the vendor 6, which is $8, for example. طبعا, this is like a matrix, and the size of the matrix in this case is what? 30 by 40, which is 1,200. Now, I want to read the data from Excel now. And then I have to report also the solution into Excel. Yani the solution should be reported over here. This is a QIJ. This is the optimal lot size, right? The optimal lot size that should be shipped from warehouse I to vendor J. The solution should be placed over here, over these empty cells. Right. Now to do that, I use the following function. Okay. This function called @OLE to import, to import the data from, to read the data from the Excel, I have to use this function OLE. Now, how this work? أول حاجة, إنه how many sets do I have? 3 sets. The first set is called warehouse. سميتها أنا where H. The parameter under the warehouse is what? The capacity. صحيح ولا لا? Vendor is another set, and the parameter under the vendor is the demand. And the combined set of warehouse and vendor is the cost and order. There is something here. The name of the set is given, and also the parameter or the variable under the set is also provided. Missing. Can we guess?
The size of the set.
اللي هو ايش؟
Size.
معلش, I cannot hear you very well.
The size of the set.
The size, excellent. Yes, the size of the set. The size of the set is not provided. Yeah, and what? How many warehouses do I have? it is not clear from the set section. It is not clear from here how many vendors do I have. صح ولا لا؟ طبعا the size of the combined depends on what the size of the warehouse and vendor. هذا اصلا ما يحتاج حتى ايش اعرف السايز اليها لانه once I define the size of the warehouse and the size of the vendor, by default the size of the combined will be determined. هذا is not a big deal. The size of the warehouse and the size of the vendor is not provided. لانه هذه ايضا جزء من ايش؟ من الداتا that I need to read from the Excel. إذا هذه حاجتين إنه the size of the warehouse and the size of the vendor should be read from Excel. Is this the only data that I need to read from the Excel? No, there's something else. I need also to read the capacity for each warehouse from the Excel file. I need also to read the demand at each vendor from the Excel file. And also I need to read the cost, the transportation cost from the Excel file. الأشياء اللي أنا أحتاج إيش أقرأها من الإكسل file. These are the names that I use along with Lingo code. لما أنا أجي أكتب اللينجو كود استخدمت الويرهاوس here, استخدمت الكاباسيتي. These are the names used in the Lingo code. فأخليها في الجهة إيش in the left hand side. In the right hand side, I have to use the names that I use in the Excel file, as you will see inshallah later. So in the left side, I have to use what? The names of the sets, parameters, whatever that I use along with Lingo code. On the right hand side, I need to use the names that I use in the Excel file. So how to read this? As we said, you use this function at OLE, then you have to specify the location of the file. الآن خلينا نروح للlocation حق الفايل. Okay, let me see here. Okay, can you see my screen يا شباب؟ Okay, هذا هو الفايل. I'm using this file called data. When you right click on data, then you go to the property. Can you see the location here? Now you right click, select all, you select the location. Okay, you select, you copy this, and then you go to Lingo, a Lingo code, نفس اللينجو, and you paste it over here. طبعا you start with quotation, with single quotation. هذا هو عبارة عن إيش؟ This one is the location of what يا إخوان? This one is the location of my file. I paste it over here. Okay, and then I type the file name. The file name is data, followed by the type. The type of the Excel here is XLSX. This is the one that is used, yani. This is separated XLSX. That means the data is separated by comma. Cells, like you separate them by comma. XLSX, okay? And then you close this, the quotation mark. لاحظ the quotation mark start from here and end with here. After that, you have to what? The names of the sets, parameters, and blah, blah, blah that you define in the Excel file. Now, let's go to the Excel file and see how this works. Okay. First of all, I need to define, still we have 10 minutes. I need to define the size of the warehouse. So what should I do? I go to the name manager, then I write here new, and then I specify the name. Sorry, first maybe just to avoid any spelling mistake, you can just click on this, name manager, then this is actually the name of the warehouse that I'm using here along with the Excel file. And then I need to specify what يا اخوان the size of the warehouse set. احنا قلنا size is not defined along with the lingo, right? And this one on it here. The size of the warehouse is what يا اخوان start from 1 to 30. صحيح? And then I need to define the vendor, which is another set. Okay, let me just type it here. I need to define, okay. I need to define the vendor. And what is the size of the vendor? Is 40, right? Start from here to there. Also, what should I define? What should I define as well? I have to define the capacity of each warehouse, right? So I need also to define the capacity. So this range, this data here. Okay. And then also I need to define the demand at each vendor. So also I need to define the demand at each vendor. Okay, that's it. Well, there is something else. وش الشيء اللي بعد ما عرفناه؟ CIJ, right? The cost, CIJ. So also I need to define the cost. I think I call it cost, just cost. So name, new, let me just type here cost. And then I need to define the range here, which is start from there to here. Okay, I'm done. The capacity, cost, demand, vendor, warehouse, all I'll define when, and the names here should with what I define in Lingo. But I can use different names here. This is fine. But once I use different names here, these names should be the same as the names that I used in Lingo. That means, I'm sorry. What I use here, these are the names used in Lingo, fine. But the names that I use in Excel is these names. And I استخدم في الإكسل قبل شوي warehouse. So I have to use here warehouse, capacity, vendor. I have to copy and paste this and use exactly the same thing. Demand, cost. Okay. Now back again to data. Now I need also to report the solution. I need to define what's something called order. I need to define, I think called order. And then I have to specify the range. The range is start from here to there. This is where my solution should be reported. Halas, I'm done. Okay, I'm done. I define all my parameters, variables, blah, blah, blah. So I'm now ready to report the solution. But if I want to read the solution, I have to use OLE, and OLE you also use to export. You export the solution from Lingo to Excel. To read the data from the Excel file, you put this here in the left-hand side. Now, if you want to export the solution to the Excel file, you put this function in the left-hand side, lax. Okay, since I use here order, and here I use order, I have to match these two things. لاحظ warehouse should match with this warehouse is matched with what? With this warehouse. CA should match with the capacity. Vendor should match with vendor. demand should match with vendor, so with demand and cost with cost. طبعا the rest is clear. I think it should not be a big deal. When I run this, I should get the solution. Okay, now let me go with the Excel. This one is the optimal solution here. For example, I have to ship 26 items from warehouse 1 to vendor 4. These zeros, the rest are zeros. That means I should not ship anything. And if you go again, okay, I think I did not. Yes. So this actually the solution reported into the Excel. Example here, 26 means that I have to ship 26 items from the warehouse 1 to the vendor 4, and the rest are zeros. Go back again to the solution reported by Lingo, just to see how beauty things can be shown by Lingo. It says here that objective function is 1,250, the total iterations is 98, and the time is 0.31, even less than 1 second. And the number of variables here is 1,200. The model class is linear programming, pure continuous programming. بقى عندنا حاجة واحدة, special constraints, and I will this special constraint, let me just go with this. وبها إن شاء الله هنختم. And for example, how would you write some special constraints? You want to generate the constraint over I and J, for example, such that I should be less than J, مثلا. So for example, here I have this, say, 3 sets. I want to generate loop over I and also over J, but I want to have I is less than J. And the same thing here, I want to make a loop over I and J, but I should not equal to J. And I should not include I and J, the same value of I and J. For example, I want to generate a loop such that I should be less than 3. And all these things is already in the Blackboard. Already posted this in the Blackboard so that you can refer to them special with your project, because some of these constraints require special handling, and this is why I put them under special constraints. I think that's it for today. And I understand that Lingo cannot be covered in one workshop or one, let's say, session. We should have more than one workshop. But the things that we covered is the basic things that you may need for your project, for your future projects, for the serial designer project. But still, if you want to explore any specific feature in Lingo, you can download the user manual or you can contact me, and you are most welcome at any time. I think that's it for the workshop. Thank you very much for the attending, and inshallah, wish you all the best in your projects. Unfortunately, I cannot answer any questions because time's up, unless you have something very quick. Yes or no questions. Then still we have only 2 minutes and I need to quit from this meeting. Any question, ya shabab? Any yes or no questions? All right, thank you very much and wish you all the best. See you inshallah. Thank you.
السلام عليكم.
عليكم السلام. تفضل خالد.
دكتور، بس من ناحية دكتور جروبي بايثون.
Yes.
What's the spelling of Groby exactly?
What is what?
The spelling. How do I write Groby?
G-O-O-R-B-I. Goroby.
G-O-O-R-B-Y.
G-O-U-B-R-I-B-I. Goroby.
Okay.
And Goroby is a solver. It's embedded with many software, like for example, Ample موجود في الجوروبي. وحتى الجامز موجود في الجروبي، لكن الجروبي المكتوب بالبايثون is the fastest one.
Yes.
اوكي. انا ان شاء الله يعني لو اذا ان شاء الله في المستقبل ممكن حتى يعني ننظم ورك شوب في الجروبي especially for the new generations who have يعني background في البايثون. We can ان شاء الله يعني arrange a workshop on how to use Gurobi to model and solve linear and nonlinear programming.
Yes, perfect. I would like that, really.
Inshallah.
But just Doctor, I searched for group. It like give me GROUPY.
BI آخر شيء BI. Yes.
Yes, Python. I couldn't find any source.
Well, we have mashallah thousands of sources, by the way, even in the YouTube. When you go to the YouTube and write Gurobi Python, mashallah, you will see a lot and a lot of examples, illustrations. And by the way, many of these software can be self, on my side, I did not attend any workshop or anything like that. I just learned this by myself. Yeah, mashallah, you have here thousands of sources where you can explore and learn yourself.
Excellent. Yeah, I found now a lot of sources, right?
Yes.
Great. Thank you, Doctor, for this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night, ya shabab. Okay. Thank you.